Hi, so thank you to everybody who's joined me for part or all of this journey. I've now completed season 1. I've had 4 conversations with people around different various topics, but all under the umbrella of health, wellness, and living well. And I'm really pleased to see that I met my objectives. I think these conversations are, hopefully relevant and timely and of interest. And exploring topics that I think are worth sharing. So this video is going to be a summary. I've grouped some clips into themes and topics that we covered during season 1. And I'd like to share those with you, and I hope it continues this dialogue. I've already got some interviews lined up for my season 2, so there will be more to come for sure. But I thought it'd be nice to kind of recap and look at some of the things that came forward. So the first kind of group of clips is around kind of health and being a naturopathic nutritional therapist in terms of practice, but also I guess how one goes through their health journey and kind of starts that practice. And I hope you enjoy them. I feel like they are quite honest. I share about the challenges that I've faced. I graduated from my diploma in naturopathic nutritional therapy in 2017 from the College of Naturopathic Medicine. And my original intention and hope was to kind of start it up as a career part-time, develop with some clients, and then kind of slowly transition away from my day job into it being more of a full-time practice. And I think I've realized after some years, like, it's really hard to practice it part-time. I think in terms of just like learning is continuous. I need to keep developing that. I've definitely had some like real confidence crises or imposter syndrome. So it hasn't been what I had hoped or expected it to be as a journey, and that original plan might not be feasible for me. But I'm sure it could be feasible for other people. But alongside that as well, I always use myself as my primary guinea pig. So trying to understand, how different health practices or changes in diet or just changes in lifestyle could be beneficial to me, and seeing the impacts and the improvements in my own health and my own life. And also not only the improvements and practices, but also understanding from a first-hand perspective the impacts, sort of what that has meant in terms of like time or, just changing your life to kind of live in a healthier way or make these modifications. I think that's definitely helpful, especially in terms of trying to understand a client or someone that comes to you for support. And that is an ever-evolving perspective for myself anyways. The other part of my own personal journey that I've tried to share, and you'll see in some of these clips, is how I initially started, with a real passion for understanding health and wellness. But it's taken me quite a few years to sort of realize that behind that passion has been a lot of fear or anxiety for myself about getting ill or, suffering with disease and death. And I think that becomes part of the journey in itself, because that obviously falls under mental health. And I've been exploring that much more in the last, I would say, 4 or 5 years, to try and understand and work with my own fears and doubts. And I do mention that in some of the clips as well. I think I realized, while studying, it's great to be learning all these different ideas and understandings of health, but I started to develop the sense of perfection and putting myself on this like health pedestal, and anything outside of that feeling unsafe and unhealthy. And I'm really now trying to relax that attitude and see that you know, we are all just doing the best that we can, especially when someone comes to seek help. We have to have a wider lens, I guess, in trying to understand, you know, there's not just one sort of diet or one kind of formula for the road to recovery or wellness for everybody. It'll be different for everyone. So yeah, that's an ongoing reflection for myself, and trying to let go of that perfection in myself, and definitely just being more at ease, I think, with yeah, and just having less anxiety, and integrating. Trying to integrate all the parts of myself and constantly redefining what is healthy. So with that, I'll share with you the first few clips. Yeah, I when I was like seeing people for my own sort of clinic, I kind of said, even if you only do like 40% of what I suggest, that's amazing. And even that, I think, is quite high. It's a lot of changes and considerations that someone has to really spend time on and think about.
I think where we've got used to medications, take the medications and it does that. But where we're trying to perhaps, you know, help clients with how they're eating, or perhaps reduce something or increase something else, you know, it takes a while for it to sort of, you know, for them to get round of what they've got to do and understand it, for them to go out and get the right food in the first place, and then they can actually incorporate it. So you've got 3 steps before you actually get to the end thing and actually eating the way that that person's asked you to do that. So it's all about managing that person's expectations that the food is not the magic pill. It will get you at the end. It will get you there at the end, but it's not going to be instant, unlike a medication, hopefully.
Yeah. How much of a success rate did you find? Like, do you think 40% is accurate or hopeful or too optimistic?
So I think where you were coming from with regards to your 40% was like, you know, here's my plan. If you do 40% of it, I mean, you know, I do see students' plans and they go on for blinking. They could go on for miles, let alone pages. It could go on for miles. Because we're just trying to fix that person in that one go because of the model that you're all, you know, you're all sort of going through. But no, for me, I tend to have around about an 80% success rate.
That's great.
I would say.
Oh wow!
But I've learned to rein it all in.
Yeah.
I've learned that I only give people, I give them maximum 6 things to do.
Got it.
And even then, they can choose 3 things, and they choose what they want to do.
That's interesting.
And then they have chosen what they want to do. It's not me dictating to them.
Yeah.
So yes, it's about setting those boundaries.
Yeah, mine was usually like 10 to 12. Very much in the student style. Like I didn't really evolve from that. No. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Growing up with a traditional Western sort of food intake, yes, of course, I now know what I should and shouldn't be eating, but I am also real, which I do know that a lot of students sort of quite like, is I do know that there are times when I'm really busy and I do have a chocolate bar. Or I don't know, it was a couple of weeks ago, I went to a takeaway and I had fish and chips. And it was, I really enjoyed it. But, you know, being in the nutrition world, you're occasionally students sort of put you on a bit of a pedestal. Oh, I'm sure she doesn't eat this and eat that. But yeah, I do. You know, because
I think it's important.
And also I enjoy it.
Yeah.
I am better now, but I do perhaps sort of take the 80-20 rule to a max.
That's great, yeah.
That's what I do.
I think that's really, being honest for myself, I think that was a really, like my study time kind of went from obviously not understanding a lot of like health and what's helpful to me to starting to understand, to going to like extreme perfectionism, you know, like, and then, but almost like a very judgmental, critical attitude of like everyone else and like I'm safe because I'm living on this pedestal. And then after graduating, realizing like, A, it's not sustainable forever for sure. And B, it's not that much fun. Like, you're not really enjoying your life if all you do is stick to this regimen. So I feel like it's really important. I'm really glad you said that, because I think it's an important thing to share. And I mean, me being the guiltiest one of all, being like judgy, but yeah, I try to backtrack on that.
That point around sort of consciousness, I suppose, and having an impact. I think the way that sort of relates to my ethos is very much around having a sense of ownership of your actions. And so it's not like, oh, there's a mosquito, bam, now you're dead. Ha ha. It's more around like, well, I've chosen to kill this mosquito because I acknowledge that from my perspective, not scratching my arms and bleeding everywhere is worth killing this thing, which is a pretty brutal thing to acknowledge to yourself. But in acknowledging it, you have that kind of ownership, and you're empowered to move through the world in a way that's quite intentional. Which can sometimes make me feel really panicked. Actually, you get overwhelmed with all these different consequences. I have a friend who has really quite severe anxiety, and the thing that happens to them is they sort of say, oh, I've got to choose between this, let's make it soil association, organic lettuce and non-organic lettuce, which isn't a big decision in day-to-day life, but for them they go, well, if I pick this organic lettuce, then I will have spent 50p more, which means that, over a space of 52 weeks, that will be like £20, and I don't have £20 in my bank account right now, and then they have a panic attack.
I've totally suffered with that.
And it spirals off so far. And when you get that hyper awareness of your impact and your intention and moving through the world, it can have that dark side to it.
Totally. I think soil association, studying nutritional therapy, all really good, but it's only recently, like in the last year or so, I've realized probably the seed for all of that is anxiety, anxiety about health. And I've totally had exactly what your friend mentioned. Even if you're shopping at Lidl or Aldi or Tesco's or wherever, I've had other times where I've been really, having, because that anxiety was mainly before I had my son, and then having a child and having moments of financial hardship and being like, well, I have to feed him.
There are priorities.
And, also dealing with a child's pickiness, chicken nuggets, that's it, chicken nuggets, or only white things. And you're just like, oh, that's not nutritional. So you kind of have to embrace I've definitely suffered with moments of I think there's a term for it, where you have an anxiety around food. I can't remember what it is, but I'll look it up. It's easy to think that if it's not got that stamp or that seal, it's not good for you, or it's not gonna give you what you need. So you had symptom 1 was chronic fatigue and joint pain, and symptom 2 was immune strength. When we went through the full consultation, I concluded that your systems, particularly under stress, was your endocrine system, and you'd mentioned high stress from your job, lots of caffeine, and very light sleep, not feeling rested generally, and a certain amount of medications, and just not actually feeling very happy. Some of the things that I put into your plan was to consider cutting out coffee for a little while. Definitely replacing simple carbs with complex carbs, including protein with every meal, trying to have 4 servings of fruit and veg a day, also having 4 to 6 different colors of fruit and veg a day if possible, but always including dark leafy greens.
All of that happens now.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about, how did it feel when you got the plan? Was it a bit much, overwhelming?
But all of that is happening today. So it's been a bit of a journey.
Yeah. So my second theme is on therapeutic practices. And I've just got a few clips from my conversation with Jenny, which I was really happy to have. My ever evolving understanding of health and wellness has very much been focusing on the mind and I guess energy and wellness, from an energetic mental capacity. I definitely believe we all sort of have energy bodies and retain energy. And I'm really fascinated by that, actually, how we can work with the energies and what we store, what we can release, and how we can sort of free ourselves from the energies or perspectives or stored things that kind of hold us back. I've definitely enjoyed different therapeutic practices over the years. Reiki, CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, psychotherapy, hypnotherapy, and things like massage, yoga, and breathwork, I think also very much fall under that same umbrella. And yeah, I thought, so I'm going to share a couple of clips, but I thought this is a great topic to highlight. I'd definitely like to explore this more in season 2. And I've actually already had a really wonderful conversation with somebody very much around therapy and therapeutic practices. And I thought I'd also share like some of the influences that I've just found really exciting. Initially there's a documentary called Heal, and I saw that on Netflix, but it might be available on other services. And a lot of the practitioners there, I was just fascinated with the way they approach things. Actually, one of the books I like to share is The Biology of Belief, and Dr. Bruce Lipton. He's in that documentary, and I think his thoughts are really fascinating on how essentially what we believe has an impact in how our cells sort of respond and show up in our environment and connects with our environment. Another great book actually is One Mind, and this is Dr. Larry Dossey, kind of talking about the connectivity between us all, which I think is also fascinating. And another just amazing, you can't get enough, well, I can't get enough of Louise Hay. This is You Can Heal Your Life. My mum bought me this beautiful book when I was in my teens, and I don't think I ever really appreciated it until much later, but I'm so glad I've kept it. And it's been just a beautiful, loving presence. So definitely an area that I would love to explore more as we continue these conversations. Could you tell me a bit about the science around it? Like what is it doing when you're breathing in that way?
Yes, so the science of controlled hyperventilation, which is what all of these practices are based on. All they're based on is hyperventilation, which just means you're overventilating. We're taking in way more oxygen, our carbon dioxide levels are lowering, and what our blood cells actually need for oxygen to be carried around the body, to the tissues, to the organs, to the brain, is carbon dioxide. So if we have less carbon dioxide, our oxygen can't bind towards the blood cells. So whilst we have loads of oxygen in our body, it can't actually bind to the cells. So it can't be taken to the brain as well. It can't be taken to the organs. So our O2 and CO2 levels in the blood, in our organs, are shifting. And as long as you're not working with a few conditions that I'm sure we'll chat about later, it's usually to a perfectly safe level. And it causes something called respiratory alkalosis, which is just, again, a change in acid and alkaline levels in the blood. And what that does to the brain, I'm not going to go into which parts because I feel like I always get them muddled up. It just lights up certain parts of the brain, usually things like the memory center, and it dampens down kind of like the ego, that monkey mind chat. So in a safe way, by altering our CO2 and O2 levels, we're changing how much oxygen is going to the brain, and that's just giving us that shift in response. And then what some people say that is scientifically proven. I don't think it is. I think it's probably on the way to being, and it totally makes sense that it is. But some people, or lots of people, say that the body actually produces with this breath practice its own DMT, which is a really heavy, powerful psychedelic.
Okay.
It's a main component in ayahuasca and others. So it's why lots of people find breathwork journeys very similar to psychedelic and plant medicine experiences.
Interesting. That's way more than I knew.
I
didn't know any of that.
I had no idea for ages, and I will talk about it in a bit more of a crass kind of basic setting like that sometimes in sessions, because I think it helps us to understand. Some people just go in spiritually. It's like we're shifting energy, we're clearing stagnant things, we're moving, we're shifting, and for me they're just tied in together. But it helps us, especially as Westerners, to feel safe, I think, understanding the science and to be able to let go and trust rather than just being like, some people find the weird like shifting energy. They're like, what the hell, I don't get it. And I think knowing the why can often get people leaning in a bit better. I mean, the more I do it, the more I'm blown away by the power of breath, because you just see more and more and more and more and more stuff happening. I mean, the trauma process is one of the biggest things, like the amount of people who I've been with and held through really big shifts, but the amount of people that have, like even last weekend, someone finished and they were crying for ages, and then they just looked at me and they just went, this was just perfect. It's just, I feel perfection. And it's just, I swear you just see the full range of like subtle. I had a group of 5 and one person was like, I just felt like Superman. I didn't get any emotional release, but I just feel so powerful in my body. And the more I breathed, the more I was like, I just feel incredible. And then the person next to them had this incredibly strong trauma release in the body and was just shaking but not just a little bit, like shaking for 45 minutes. I've watched energy release if I'll put my hands without touching them above someone's heart, and then all of a sudden it moves. You see the big stuff, you see the small stuff, you see the people that really are struggling to get into it. I facilitated with Tim Morrison, who's quite a well-renowned facilitator, and some of the stuff I saw in that space was insane. How deep people went, and what I had to sit with people with. So it's continually evolving, and it's continually like, it gives me more confidence the more I go, and the more trust of like holding people through, and also what the power of it is.
Yeah, very exciting.
But what breathwork can do that talk therapy often just can't, just get you out of your mind and into what's stored in the body. The body keeps the score. It's also a way of processing stuff for those who aren't ready to talk.
So these next clips kind of are themed around the topic, it's a wide topic, of world, climate, impact, community, and connection generally. And I've got some clips from my conversation with Freya and Jenny and also Karen. And I think it's really important in terms of seeing ourselves within the world and the impact that we can have. I really believe it's so important to understand that my voice or my input matters. And actually that ties back really nicely to the clip with Ankita, and seeing that over time the suggestions and help I tried to support her with actually did have an impact and helped improve her well-being. And I think it's an important reminder to me that, the wider perspective of time, things aren't always immediate, but also cumulative benefits. I think that's a term I really try to focus on. It's, and much with like health and wellness, all of these suggestions or practices are little things that we can do every day, and maybe in that specific day it's not going to have a drastic impact or change on my health, but cumulatively across 5 years, 10 years, it does, and this contributes to wellness generally. So these clips, we're talking a bit about impact in terms of sort of like taking action or being on the front lines of change, but also through the lens of the Soil Association, And I love the Soil Association for many reasons. But in choosing to support them or choosing organic food, I think it's such a positive impact it can have by not only changing your health and having a beneficial impact on that, but the health of nature all around us and the climate in general as well. There's so many positive impacts. It's such a impactful decision to choose to eat organically where we can. But again, back to my first comment, you know, not having that sense of perfection and understanding that we're all doing the best that we can, I think is also important here. But there is a Buddhist understanding that victory for me cannot be in isolation. You know, we are all connected. So, you know, otherwise you can say kind of like a win-win as a philosophy, but I think it's beautiful to understand that I cannot win in isolation if it's at the expense of the environment or someone else. So it ties very closely, I think, to Soil Association ethos, where everything is connected and we're seeing how positive things can affect multiple different targets, I guess, essentially. And I think other than that, philosophically, I really believe everything matters. And again, cumulatively, every effort counts. Nothing is wasted in that sense. So yeah, I hope you can enjoy these next few clips.
It's a really interesting thing around the labelling, because on the one hand, there's this slight sort of elitism associated with organic, which is something I know that the Soil Association is trying to sort of address, where it's kind of seen as this sort of premium product. And partly you're in this sort of traction circle where if there's so little support and if it's so expensive, it kind of stays in that bubble. But as soon as people realise that kind of organic is something that is climate action, and we build up that market share, then it can become more sort of financially self-sustaining and viable. And you were talking earlier about how you have an impact, and at points when you felt sort of disempowered about the climate. And the Soil Association is doing this really interesting thing where it's kind of got, I was going to say two-pronged, but it's more like sort of eight-pronged approach, where we can sort of talk to and sort of engage individuals. Because if people understand that idea of organic as climate action, then that's something that empowers you to have an impact on the climate. And that's really exciting for you, and it means that you can drive up that demand, because organic is something understood for what it should be understood as, which is a solution to the health, nature and climate crises, rather than like a thing that posh people do in Waitrose.
I've had some really beautiful conversations, feedback and chats over the year about how much just getting that feel of community and openness and safe space has shifted people's perspective about what yoga is, about going on their wellness journey, about shifting stuff. And it just takes a person to do it. Like I've had people do it for me, where just by someone opening a door, it's given me a chance to really walk through it, and it's changed my life. And so I like to hope that I've just maybe been a door for a few people there.
Nice, I'm sure. Yeah, I find that really interesting. I think I in my dabbles into yoga, I've come to understand like the physical, like your body doing, because I always said I'm not very bendy, I'm not very stretchy, and like it's not my thing. But then I've realized like it's actually more about the mind and like sitting with it, and then the emotional side, like you said, like sometimes the frustration or the difficulty that comes up is actually the purpose, and I guess tapping into that, or just having the mindfulness to connect with it. So I'm a bit slow, maybe late to the party, but like
and the body is almost like, for me, the least of it, which we find really hard to unpack, especially in spaces where you're like, oh, that person's doing that thing and I can't do this and I can't. For me, me personally, it's about connection to body, tuning into what your body's giving you, shifting stuff that is in your body. It's just another modality of, I'd say at the end of every single class without fail, and it kind of ties into what you were saying. It's something that makes people like laugh, but I really seriously mean it. I'm like, have a beautiful day. I say all the chat about where to find me, and I'm like, be nice to yourself, please be nice to other people, and that's how we're going to change the world. And it sounds so ridiculous and cheesy, but I'm like, that when for me, we shouldn't just be here for this like self, which I think sometimes we can get. It's like, just if you go by those principles, like it's a very, very baseline. Just be kind to yourself, be kind to those around you.
Yeah.
And I really try and drill in, like, remember that, guys.
Good.
Don't, if I get so upset, and I've told people this before, when we do this class and everyone's all like, peace, love, and then I go downstairs and I see someone being really rude to the concierge. And I'm like, no, it's not just for your mat. This is practice, whatever we're showing up for, that is hopefully going to lead us out to be making a better footprint on the world outside here.
Definitely. Yeah. No, I definitely believe in that principle. I think because it can be really overwhelming to look at like trying to fix the world. But obviously it starts in what you're doing, where you are, who you're with, and just showing up in, the best way we can.
I see human rights and climate as being not the same thing, but very, very related. You have climate refugees now, and you have cases where there's some really interesting stuff around the law now. I'm not going to talk on it now because I'm not an expert, but around kind of how we look at holding people accountable for climate change. And quite a lot of that is done through the lens of the impact it has on people. Yes. Because we have a legal kind of framework and understanding that's about harms or rights associated with people. So if you look at that as a route into climate change, like, there's been climate change, a glacier has flooded a town, how do we address that? What's the effect on the people? It's not the fact that we've hurt nature. That's kind of quite often, I think, how it's sort of looked at. I might be wrong there.
Well, you also, like you mentioned to me in your notes about faith in nature, putting nature on the board, and I looked that up. I thought it was so interesting. Yeah. And there was two things that stood out. Like there was that, and I thought it's such a wonderful, like they actually made the effort to get the legal, wording or contracts around having nature be an actual member of its board, which I thought was really outstanding. And basically saying, giving nature a vote, which I think is really cool. But the other one was also New Zealand, I think it was in 2017, passed a law to give nature the same rights, or it was maybe one particular river, but giving it the same rights as people, which I thought, that's such a big and exciting shift. Like, I definitely feel, I'm very much an optimist. I don't deny that. But I definitely feel like there is a changing of the tide that's kind of like, that's shifting awareness and perspectives, and
I really want to, I didn't know about the New Zealand thing, I really want to look that up now, because the faith in nature point, nature on the board, it's not this kind of, they haven't put like a love fern in a chair in the boardroom, they've got individuals representing nature. Yeah. And the thing around sort of nature having the same rights, or a river having the same rights in New Zealand, is really interesting to me, because if you think about human rights and what does it mean to have human rights? Yeah. It's about human rights and responsibilities is quite often what people will throw up, because if everybody disappeared right now and we just dropped you in the desert, it doesn't matter if you have a human right to shelter or to water or to asylum, because there's nobody to give it to you. True, So the idea of nature having rights, I love that idea as a concept, but I'm really interested in how the rights and the responsibilities piece kind of fits together, because at the end of the day, it's a different thing. It's not well, you can definitely argue that nature has a consciousness, but it's not a sort of I'm going to speak my mind now. It isn't a sort of human thing. I just to sort of add that point around sort of consciousness, I suppose, and having an impact. I think the way that sort of relates to my ethos is very much around having a sense of ownership of your actions. And so it's not like, oh, there's a mosquito, bam, now you're dead. Ha ha. It's more around like, well, I've chosen to kill this mosquito because I acknowledge that from my perspective, not scratching my arms and bleeding everywhere is worth killing this thing. Which is a pretty brutal thing to acknowledge to yourself. But in acknowledging it, you have that kind of ownership and you're empowered to move through the world in a way that's quite intentional. Which can sometimes make me feel really panicked, actually. You know, I get overwhelmed with all these different consequences. I have a friend who has really quite severe anxiety, and the thing that happens to them is they sort of say, oh, I've got to choose between this, let's make it soil association, organic lettuce and non-organic lettuce, which isn't a big decision in day-to-day life, but for them they go, well, if I pick this organic lettuce, then I will have spent 50p more, which means that, you know, over a space of 52 weeks, that will be like £20, and I don't have £20 in my bank account right now, and then they have a panic attack.
I've totally suffered with that.
And it spirals off so far. When you get that hyper awareness of your impact and your intention and moving through the world, it can have that dark side to it.
Totally. So thank you so much for joining me and watching this summary. I hope it was interesting, and I hope it's exciting to hopefully come back and join me for more conversations. I thought I would lay an Easter egg for some of the next conversations. As I mentioned, I've already had one of them and will be releasing that some point in the next few months. I wanted to share, this is a book of short stories. It's called Litmus, and I just wanted to read a couple of paragraphs which are kind of leading into one of the conversations I'll be releasing for season 2, and I hope that you'll join me for that. 2, meaning far more as one than as they're separate two. 2, mattering far more together than apart. 2, as one to make sense of both, 2 and of one. I am a shadow, and there is no light to make me. There is a Buddhist concept, Esho Fumi. It translates as 2 but not 2, 1 but not 1. That's space-time, my love. That was us. And in time, because neither space nor time can ever part again, it is us still. Everything is moving. Everything is joined. It's all about perception.